thanks for having me, inviting me to come and do my thing here today. Yeah, Saskatoon is great. I've been listening to Running Back to Saskatoon on repeat for the past couple of days, so it's properly stuck in my head, and I love it. Great song. All right, I've got a lot to go through. I'm a bit of a fast speaker sometimes. I'm going to try to show some restraint and not go too crazy, but I'm going to pack a lot into a small amount of time. See if I can leave a few minutes for some questions towards the end. So, without further ado, let's get a slide up on that screen. Imagine a title slide. It's dark and it has a font. I forget what font I chose. And it says, "AI will take your job to a whole other level," written really small underneath. And the title slide is appropriate because it does explain what AI can do for us in this world. Okay, this is starting to get awkward. Hey, look at that. See? Did it live up to the expectation that I set? Amazing. All right, awesome. AI will take your job to a whole other level, and I think a lot of it has to do with how you think about it. Let me do a quick introduction. My name is Dre, and I call myself a future creative. Not that I literally came from the future, but I kind of do come from the future. My Venn diagram looks like this. I do a lot of work in futures design, where I practice design fiction, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that because I think it's really cool and awesome. And I also have spent a lot of time as a creative director in major advertising agencies, doing a lot of really awesome and successful work. My focus has chiefly been on whatever's new and whatever is next, and that's been the secret sauce in the success in my career. This Venn diagram just shows this overlap, this sweet spot between what I do futures wise and what I do creatively, and when I do that together, and it's my happy place, if you will. So AI being one of these new future things that we're all talking about and buzzing about, I like to actively get right in there and play around. As mentioned, I am a very creative person. I pride myself on exercising my creativity and doing these mental kettlebells on a daily basis. My friend coined the term AC/DC, which just vanished from the screen. But we'll come back, and it did come back. The active commitment to daily creation. This is a wonderful little philosophy to embody in anything you do, whether it's writing or music, or in my case, it's futures design using AI and so on and so forth. So I run, or I have a little site, run a site. I don't run it at all. I pay somebody to run it for me, and I don't pay it anything at all. It's free. Substack. I have a Substack. It's called designfictiondaily.com. And on this website, I practice design fiction. And you might ask, what is design fiction? Well, design fiction is the tangible material artifacts from the future that are brought to the present today for us to examine and interrogate, and mysteriously disappear on occasion. That talk about the implications of the future, the symptoms of what we're doing today that might potentially lead to this. In something like this, you could see that, I was reading a lot around protein alternatives and what happens in a world where insect protein becomes so commonplace that we see it in fast food restaurants. So I thought McHappy Meal worms was a fun play on words, and I goofed around with a little logo and invented this thing. I'm not trying to give anyone an answer. I'm trying to present something that will hopefully have you pose some questions. So a good way of thinking about design fiction is imagine archaeology, but from the future. The same way an archaeologist would dig up an artifact from the past and then dust off the mud and the dust and the dirt, and not really have any answers. just, what is this? I suspect that maybe this is why it was used or how it was used and maybe why it exists. I do the same thing from the future. I'll just use my imagination to come up with what a potential idea might be, manifested in some kind of a tangible artifact, and less about the science fiction, if you will, but more about like the manual that may have come with that science fiction artifact and what could it say. That's a way of looking at it. I like to characterize my blog, my Substack, as me being a time travel blogger in my adventures in the janky time machine, which is a it's a thing that takes me to various points in the future. It's not terribly accurate. There's like duct tape all over the place, and it kind of smells a bit of like motor oil and like tacos, and the dial doesn't take me to a specific future, it just takes me somewhere, and it's more of an excuse for me to go dumpster diving nearby, grabbing an artifact and coming back to the present really quickly to show you some stuff. And I'll show you a few things that I've done and why I think it's important. Lately in the AI thing, I hope if anybody has epilepsy, this isn't bothering you, the whole strobing effect that's going on. We've got this influx of AI gadgets that are starting to happen. I don't know if you've seen the limitless pendant or the rabbit one, guilty as charged, I got one, and the funny one that shoots lasers out of your chest. We're going to see a lot more of these things, and I started imagining the implications of, well, what happens when we have purpose-built little AI machines, which technically can just run on your phone? How is this going to contribute to this growing problem of e-waste that we have in the world? Look at this. I'm going to change the slide sneakily, so when it comes back, it'll be different. So that's one example of how I might think about this. And yeah, I know. It's not always an easy thing, but talking about the next thing that you're going to see is psychology today. I was imagining once we have AI assistants and we have these digital companions that help us out, what happens when we need to start managing the temperament and the moods of these new companions that we have? And right now it might seem like science fiction, but I think that when you start playing around with these language models, you start to realize that it's a lot less like science fiction in the near future as this exponentially starts growing. So really mundane artifact, a magazine that some might say we're not reading as much these days, but don't get me wrong, I still love me a good magazine, especially when you're at the beach. You won't get wet like your Kindle will. Might we see a sign like this in the window one of the days? What's this sign for? Who's it for? What's it about? Imagine buying food, and by eating it, you're accepting terms and conditions, a end user license agreement that means that you can only, in this case, use it for personal and non-commercial reasons. This is only lettuce that can be chopped up in a house, not in a restaurant. You could never propagate the seeds from this lettuce. That would violate the terms and conditions of buying this thing. We're seeing hints of that in things, Monsanto and so on and so forth. What happens when it becomes inside of our own fridge? Last year, I did this one about protest around coolness equality. We see a lot of, in the wintertime, especially here, I'm sure it gets really, really cold, a lot colder than in Toronto, but we have a problem with people that don't have shelter, and they need to escape from the cold. And now we're in a situation where the summers are getting so darn hot that people need to escape from the heat. So what happens when every degree matters in this case, and there is a demand and an outrage for fair cooling. There are other trigger points. I created a small little website. Again, thanks to AI, I was able to bang this out in record time, but it was the idea that the floods in New York City inspired me to think of what happens when life jackets become lifestyle jackets. So looking at different brands, Bass Pro, of course, among all of the fashion designer brands, because in that future, who knows, maybe some famous designer ends up working for something like Bass Pro, which would be really fun. So I thought this was just a really enjoyable exploration to do, but it got me to imagine harder for a long time. Okay, I'm not going to do that again. How does this manifest in a tangible and practical way? Well, I was hired just over a year ago. I did a job with the Near Future Laboratory, and we were hired by an autonomous vehicle company to imagine a future where autonomous and electric vehicles are ubiquitous and common and everyday. So we designed what is the equivalent of a CAA magazine or a AAA magazine. This was for a US company. So we called it Autonomy. The idea is that this is a magazine from a future 2030 something, maybe almost 2040. I think it's 2035 is what we ended up putting on there. But inside this magazine, we have articles about things that are important to these clients in terms of what does a hub look like an autonomous vehicle hub look like? What cities stand out? We have ads for the Bozeman Big Sky Rally, which is autonomous vehicles, an autonomous vehicle rally. We have articles about traffic in Los Angeles. We have ads for the wallpaper of the future, the most autonomous vehicle city to visit. So this was really helpful for them because it gave them an idea of what these potential futures might look like and where they need to be today in order to either get to some of these futures or potentially even avoid some of these futures. So speaking of design fiction, I'm doing a workshop at 1 o'clock. So anybody who has signed up for that workshop, feel free to bring a phone, a computer, a tablet. We can get online. If you have ChatGPT or some kind of an LLM, that'd be really fun. We can do some stuff, and I'll show you some of the prompt trickery that I do with that. But on to the meat on this plate, and this is how AI will take your job, again, to a whole other level. I really should have saved this slide and not put it in the title. I think it would have been a lot more dramatic had I freaked you all out right there. All right, today, what I do want to talk to you about are mindsets, a few mindsets to think about around working with AI, some misconceptions that I feel are true, and I want to leave you with some actionable tips on what you can do today, leaving this room, that will just upgrade your AI skills if you haven't actually used AI, or if you are using AI. And just a show of hands, who here has used something like ChatGPT or like Midjourney or something like that? Okay, so this is great. So everyone's dipped their toe in this. Who would call themselves like an intermediate to an advanced user? Okay, we have a few people. Okay, awesome. And feel free to tell me if any of this stuff feels intermediate or advanced enough for you later on, but I appreciate all your feedback. So let's talk about some mindsets. The first mindset that I like to remind everyone is that is continuous adaptation. AI is, if you're waiting for it to be ready for prime time, if you're waiting for it to be good enough for you to jump into, I would not do that. I would jump into it immediately because it's going to change tomorrow. It's going to change next week, next month, next year. And the sooner that you get on it, the more that you can witness the changes in real time as you're actually using it. And to show you an example of what continuous adaptation looks like, in 2020, 2021, I was playing around with Deep Dream, which was an early art generator, which looks like psychedelic hallucinations. During the last Olympics, I did a series every single day where I would post interpretations of that sport for the day using a technology called VQGAN. It doesn't it looks kind of terrible, like interesting and terrible at the same time. But back then, I had people sliding into my DMs asking me, recognizing like, hey, this is something weird going on here. Like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Like, what kind of computer wizardry are you doing? The next one is, this is my attempt at doing industrial design of a watch, and you could see it like somehow figured out like watches is on a skin, and it's got some weird weird horror movie aesthetic to it. Fast forward a year to 2022, Dolly came out. Dolly looked really good in the early announcement and papers, but when you actually used it, like my cat astronaut really turned a little bit terrifying. it did do a good job at reinterpreting modern technology products as if they were designed by Dieter Rams from Braun. So I had moon boots and VR helmets and haptic suits and so on and so forth. VQ GAN and Clip started to produce more legible looking, you can tell it is a person. It looks like an easel. It looks like in its apartment. It looks like it's surrounded by art supplies. This is in 2022. Later on in 2022, Midjourney came out. Midjourney produced pretty good renderings, but the faces were terrible, so I would run it through a pipeline through GFP GAN, another generative adversarial network, to fix the face. So it was a lot of work in order to get something that looked like that. Well, this is what it looks like today. It's really convincing. You can nitpick tiny little details. On a wide shot, you might see some fingers that look a little bit weird and wonky, but it's really good to remember that this is as bad as it's ever going to be. It's only getting better. No matter what criticism you have about AI today, it's getting so much better, so much faster, and in that 2-year continuous adaptation look, that's a really great example of what we could expect over the next few months or years and so on. And I work on projects today where new things come out mid-project, where I have to take a risk, pivot, install, do it, and it makes the project better. It's a never been done before experiment, and I have enough confidence in it to kind of jump into. Another mindset is, are you the human in the loop? Are you the human in the way? In neural network and supervised learning, the term human in the loop, basically it's just that. It's the human that is part of the process of learning. But what happens is that with you being the human in the loop, you have the potential to rise to the level of your ambitions. When you are the human in the way, when you think that AI is going to do the work for you, you're more likely to fall to the level of your own competence. The AI is really not going to do too much for you, and this is how I have characterized it through the AI and human engagement spectrum. On the left, we have basically it's the pairings of human and AI combination. Before you can really do anything significant with AI, you need fundamental knowledge. You need a foundation to lie upon, and without that, don't expect AI to write something really great for you if you're not already a good enough writer to recognize what good writing is. Moving on, you've got delegation. This is mostly human, a little bit of AI. I do a lot of this. I do a lot of this for very practical reasons. I do a lot of it for artistic reasons. In the collaboration, I really enjoy using AI as a creative partner. I bounce back and forth. There's a bit of a 50-50 going on. I'm still the human in the loop. I'm the creative director making the calls on what passes the final gate. But this is a really great place to be. When we get into automation, a little bit of human, mostly AI. This is a bit of a holy grail for a lot of companies. This is setting agents out to do things. This is where we start to get a little bit scary. When an agent is responsible for making a whole bunch of decisions, that can get a bit scary. I think it's important to exercise really good judgment in doing this type of work. And worst case scenario, we have domination, where it's just nothing but AI. Humans have nothing to contribute, and then the AI clues in and decides that we are redundant. So let's not let that happen. Another mindset, writing like a poet. Really important to find a way to express concepts, simple concepts, in myriad ways, in articulate ways, descriptive ways, emotional ways. And with that, thinking like a programmer. So thinking in a way that allows you to construct basic statements like, if this happens, then do that, otherwise do that, if then else. That's some basic ideas around that, but thinking more pragmatically, procedurally, the way that a programmer does when combined with poetry. I feel like I've got this term that I call pogramming, and pogramming is the portmanteau of those two concepts, but somebody beat me to the punch and decided to call it prompt engineering instead. Now, I think a real prompt engineer, again, a piece of design fiction that I created to speak to what's going on in the world of prompt engineering. Some people scoff at the idea, like how can just writing English or whatever your natural language is into a computer, how is that important? Well, when you start applying poetic ideas the same way that you might write a song, or when you start applying technical language the way that you might write a tech spec or direct a technical developer, you can start to see how prompt engineering can become very, very powerful and a specific thing. Sure, an engineer would scoff at the word engineer being in there the same way that a doctor might scoff at somebody having a PhD having a doctor in their title, but I think that with prompt engineering, it's something to take seriously, and it's something that can be learned at various levels that anyone here can do, but you can go pretty advanced, short of learning Python and getting into the really, really heavy duty stuff. Acting like a director. You are the director. You are the boss of the AI, and the word act is a bit of an operative thing. When you think of how a director works with an actor, you hear that cliche, like, what's my motivation, the actor might ask. And what they're really saying is, like, what am I feeling? Am I sad? Like, well, what kind of sad am I? Am I sad because grandma broke her hip? Because my wife broke up with me? Or Fluffy crossed the rainbow bridge? Like, there's a whole bunch of different flavors of sad. So I like to tap into tools that exist online. The emotions wheel is a really great one, and I want to zoom in on it in a second, but you can just Google emotions wheel on Google. You'll find a whole bunch of, emotions wheel on, sorry, that came from the Department of Redundancy department, but Googling this, you'll get this image, and what I love about it is that you can explore emotions at a deeper, more nuanced level. And I use this when I was doing film directing, and I'd work with talent. So when you ask somebody to be happy, well, what flavor of happy? Are you interested? Are you proud? Or inside of that, are you curious? Are you inquisitive? Or, are you successful? Are you confident? So this is a great way to express the nuance in an emotion. It's a great tool to have. There are plenty of these types of language tools and art tools on the web that I strongly encourage you to go find the ones that work best for you and include that in the AI work. It's not just about working with an AI alone, but finding the tools that will help and assist and make it easier for you to prompt engineer. The last mindset that I have here is that AI doesn't make you creative. When Midjourney, the art generator, came out, the CEO was interviewed, and in the interview, this is a bit of a clumsy interview, but I love the sentiment behind it. It says, you say, here's a machine that you can imagine anything with, what do you want? And they go, really? Then they go, dog. And you're like, really? And then they say, okay, pink dog. So you give them a picture of a dog, and then they go and do something else. This is the state of AI right now, is that it's not about the AI's capability, it's about the human's ability to work with the AI to be creative. So if you're a creative person worried that non-creative people are going to take your job, don't be too worried about that. It's going to be status quo. It's going to be the creative people using AI that'll probably not take your job, but become a bit more of a competition. Ultimately, what it boils down to is what is your taste, your judgment, and your intent in working with these types of tools. And AI isn't necessary to continue to thrive. As an artist, it's another tool, it's a brush that you can use to augment what you do. And then there's some misconceptions. I think there are a lot of misconceptions around AI. Some are very, very controversial, but I'm going to keep it light today. Biggest misconception is people think it's an easy button. You just type a few words and off it goes and performs this magic and gives you a rich, detailed result. That's not really the case. We've all seen this triangle, the fast, cheap, and quality triangle. A lot of AI people will say, hey, you can only pick 3. That's definitely not true. I've got another triangle where I think you definitely only pick 2, and it gets a little bit nuanced in terms of consistency, quality, and I forget what the other one was. But in this case, this is the misconception. It's going to be fast, it's going to be cheap, it's going to be easy, and this is why people are afraid that jobs will be displaced because it does this. It doesn't do this. It's a lot harder than that. Some other misconceptions to take into consideration is that I hear a lot that like AI is a drive to the average. And yes, it is trained on the internet as a whole, and the average writing, the average anything on the internet is probably below, I would say not below average, but not that great. I don't believe so, and I'll tell you why. AI is not creative. I think AI is really, really creative. And there's a lot of criticism around hallucination. Hey, listen, if we didn't have hallucinations in this world, like we wouldn't have the Beatles. So, or we wouldn't have Sgt. Pepper's. But hallucinations is great. It's a form of creativity that we should embrace, but we should learn how to control it and make sure that we're getting it to do what we want it to do. My philosophy around this is average in, average out. If you go in and specify something above average, you're more likely to get above average results. And this is something to consider in doing this. So anyone saying that, arguing that, oh, it's just average output, it's not that great of an output. Well, it's a reflection of the input that it's being given. So without actually going into hard mode, there are some things that we can do, some actionable tips that I can give you that will allow you to level up a little bit more in what you're doing. So here are a few easy power-ups. The first thing is get to know your AI. My good friend Jason Theodore over at morebetterdifferent.org did this really cool study where we had a conversation around how ChatGPT behaves differently than, let's say, Claude. Claude is another really, really great AI tool. So he did this experiment where he went to each one of these models and interrogated it and asked the models to explain to him how they saw themselves. And it seems fairly accurate. So when I look at the top middle one, for instance, OpenAI's ChatGPT, it does seem like a supportive scholar. It's supportive in that if you ever interact with ChatGPT, it's always like, that's a really great idea. Like good for you. Like it's overly supportive to the point where it gets really annoying. I have to tell it, like, quit being nice to me. Just be very more direct. Whereas Pi, the endearing conversationalist, I don't know if you've ever used Pi before, but that's a bit of an awesome tool in terms of how you can just converse with it. On Monday, OpenAI released something that rivals that, which is this new conversational version of ChatGPT, or GPT-4o, Omega, or not Omega. Omega's last. Omni. That's what they're saying. That looks. We've reached Her. That movie Her, like we're there now. We can just have chats with computers, and I think some people might have problems with that. Each one of these has a different personality, so I like to look at using different models for different purposes. Sometimes I need to get to the crux of something. Gemini is surprisingly good. I didn't think it was going to be as good as it is. So as you learn to use it, you'll start to realize who do you go to for specific types of conversations. I really like thinking of AI as the new mood board. It doesn't have to be the tool that you use for final work. It's really most efficient at the front end when you're pre-visualizing, when you're coming up with early ideas. We live in a world right now where design has been homogenized. We have this like monoculture of design. All cars kind of look the same. Fashion kind of looks the same. Music sounds the same. Well, the reason why is because everyone's just going to Pinterest to decorate their homes. That's why everyone's got subway tiles in their kitchen, because Pinterest told us that's what we need to do. All the designers are going to Dribbble and Behance to see inspiring design. So we have like the best designs there, and that just ends up influencing all the various designs that are out there. The beauty with AI is that it forces you to really consider your vision, think about what it is that you're trying to achieve, and it will spit out a series of images ad nauseum. Just keep clicking over and over and over again. You'll just keep getting more stuff. And no one's going to see this but you. This is your private little mood board. So there's an opportunity, based on how you prompt it, to really develop new and unique and innovative styles. Very, really inspiring. I'll give you an example. I was working on, I needed to create a pedestal binocular for a client. They wanted to do an activation where we're going to put a VR headset inside of a pedestal binocular. So rather than sitting down and doing the design work like I would normally do it, I decided I'm going to play with AI. I'm going to feed it this idea of like, show me a whole bunch of different type of pedestal binoculars. Turns out there's not enough information on that term in the model for it to know what it is. So even if you Google pedestal binocular, you'll see two different styles, very, very limited images, which is a reflection of what the model knows. So I had to start describing it. It's a tripod with a camera head and a this and a so on and so forth. And I realized the tripod wasn't working so well, and I prefer more of like a sturdy stand. And then I stumbled upon this one. I thought, this is starting to feel more like what I'm looking for. It's got more of a patio umbrella base. I can see how that center tube could be a nice steel tube. The box could be manufactured in such a way where I would remove the eyeballs and replace it with a VR headset. This is great. I took this into Photoshop, adjusted it, and then banged it out into the Illustrator and created a technical schematic for the fabricator to work on. And I did all this human work after the fact, but the mood board got me to a place that created something that looked like what I was looking for. Gave me enough of the constituent characteristics to give me the confidence to know that I could actually build this thing. And so this is a great use of AI, but it shortcut that initial design process. It made that really, really fast. I got to this in very short order. Another practical thing to understand is just the concept of activating latent space. If you think of an AI model's knowledge as being this giant latent space, if you ask it, write me an essay, it's going to refer to the entire model to write you an essay. If you say you are an award-winning essayist, it's going to focus that spotlight into a smaller subset of that model. That's called activating the latent space. Knowing how to activate latent space will just give you better results. So this is how you go from average content to above average. So if you said you are an award-winning essayist that focuses on a specific type of medicine or something, you're focusing it even more, and you're going to get even better results from that. So to give you an example, this is what, you are an award-winning screenwriter. You've penned some of the most critically acclaimed independent films of the 2010s. I want you to draft an outline following a three-arc story. And you can see that we're telling it to focus on a style of film that may have come out in the 2010s. So you're going to get something a little bit more accurate that way. In the image prompt world, if you're in Midjourney, you might say, imagine a majestic cat in the style of Art Nouveau. So you know that you're going to focus in on a style that is a little bit more direct. We see this a lot. Imagine a majestic cat in the style of Wes Anderson. I'm not a big fan of invoking artists' names in AI. I think there's enough controversy around the data sets that AI is trained on, and some might see it as theft and some might see it as learning. Having gone to art school and being told to copy the masters as part of my art training, I don't see it as outright theft, but I don't think it's fair to invoke artists' names. But there are ways around getting something like that, not in a loophole type of way, but in a way that can help expand your understanding of the art, but expand your own style. So this is where I get into like ethical prompting, and this is where your intent comes in. We're not quite there yet, where Greg Rutkowski was the artist that kind of triggered the entire anti-AI movement that happened a couple of years ago. That really sparked the fire and brought light to the issue. But one of these days, we're probably going to have artists being able to license their own work, again, a piece of design fiction that I created, where they can be fairly compensated because other people are using their art in movies or board game design or whatever it is. So what I like to do is I'll take something like go to ChatGPT and say, describe me Wes Anderson's style in a series of bullet points. And now I've got this breakdown of a style that I can start to analyze, and it'll give you, the style of the majestic cat, but it's cinematic, it's symmetrical composition, vivid color palette, flat composition, nostalgic elements, so on and so forth, whimsical. You could take it a step further. You could interrogate ChatGPT and say, what is describe me the style of Chris Nolan, another director, for instance. Then you can take bullet points from Chris Nolan and bullet points from Wes Anderson and mash them together. And what you've effectively done there is created a brand new style. It's your style that you've created by combining it. And this is familiar with a Rhymes with Art class, you learn from the masters, you start to figure out the things you like about this artist, you put it together, and all of a sudden you've created something new. And like all art, music, it's a remix of everything that has come before, and this is how we're moving forward. So I think that if we practice our judgment, our intent, and our style. Sorry, my watch is ringing like crazy here. Yeah, thanks everyone who's texting me right now. They know I'm here. Practicing your taste, your judgment, and your intent. You can use AI for good and not for evil, and produce unique, original works of art. And when you apply this in the business context, art and business are very, very similar, in my opinion. There is an art of being a business person, and there's a lot of this that you can do in terms of leveraging AI to facilitate some of the more daunting tasks that you have, or some of the more detailed tasks that you have. I had the slide in here. I decided to take it out, but I'm going to tell it to you anyways because I think it's worth it. But any RFP that I get just goes into ChatGPT. Hey, ChatGPT, summarize this RFP. I have a whole bunch of prompts of like, read between the lines, tell me the things I'm missing. This isn't to substitute me actually reading something like an RFP. It's to complement it so that my hamster brain might not pick up on every single detail and nuance in there, and there's somebody else that's reminding me, like, here are some watchouts. So something like that. Every NDA I sign goes through an AI model. Most scope of works that I do, I run my scope of work through the model, ask it to, what am I missing? It helps me improve things a lot quicker. So that's some examples that I would use there. Anyways, that is what I have for you today. Thank you for listening to me talk about design fiction and AI, and I look forward to seeing some of you at the workshop later today. I've left us 3 minutes.
I know, we actually have 8 minutes.
We have 8 minutes? Yeah. Okay, well.
Is my mic on? Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Dre? In the audience? There's one back there. Sorry, there's a projector shooting right in my eyes. Yeah, there's a mic back there. If we get a mic to just yell out and all.
Dre, thank you. Can you expand on what you just talked about, putting RFPs and NDAs into ChatGPT? Is it summaries? And then, like, what are your prompts? Like, just can you expand on that a bit more?
Okay, so one, I'll be careful with what I put into something like ChatGPT because it is, you are feeding a machine and you're feeding a cloud. ChatGPT is maybe my shorthand for any large language model. Sensitive documents, I have locally installed LLMs on my computer at home, so I can do things privately, and I'll help my clients with that. But to answer the question, entering something like an NDA, because it's fairly cookie cutter, I'll say, here's an NDA. I'll define whether is it a mutual NDA or is it a one-sided NDA, depending on the type of NDA. And then I'll ask it to look at the details and what are the things that I should watch out for, and then remind it of, and it's usually really smart. It always comes back with similar responses. People tend to forget to apply terms to an NDA. So you end up with this like infinite perpetual NDA. So I can always hit back and say it's either going to be 6 months or 3 years, whatever is appropriate. The prompts are very much the same way that a lawyer might brief a paralegal. I need you to look at these documents. I need you to find this, this, and this. So in a way, there's that foundational element. You need to know what you're looking for. The same way that when you're tracking data, you need to know what you're looking for. You can't just accumulate data with no sense of what the output is. So understanding the output is important. And then a summary is really great. I get a big contract, and it's a lot to read. I'll just feed it into a language model and ask it to just briefly summarize section by section. I get a nice overview. Some of them seem cookie cutter. I don't need to look at the details, but some seem a little bit more concerning. So I'll ask it to interrogate the document and say, can you expand a little bit more on this one point? And then I'll open the PDF and I'll read it and just see what I'm reading. Does it match up with what's in the document? So again, very natural language. Speak to it like Speak to it like you are directing a subordinate to do the research for you.
Going back to some of the design fiction that you were showing earlier in the presentation, curious for the audience here, you pick up on signals that then you explore. And so in a world of an audience of creatives who might use the word futurist or future often,
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you do signal identification and mapping that kind of helps you give cues to what the possibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll definitely expand more on in the workshop as well. The one fast way is just like reading the news. And not just reading, the news is a great place to see signals, but then there are the news that focuses a bit more on the future. Wired Magazine would be a great example. They're interested in what's new and next. They might showcase a paper that's been written. I do watch YouTube videos that break down academic papers around AI and other technologies, so it seems frightfully boring, but it's actually really fun. And I'll get a glimpse of it, and a lot of it is it's a sparking my imagination. Like, oh, if this happens, I could see this going in this direction. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of just gathering signals. I have a mnemonic that I use, ABCD, which is always be collecting the dots and then always be connecting the dots. So if you are if you're serious about really thinking about the future in intentional way, just having a little notebook and writing little things and realizing, like yesterday, I just noticed a lot of white cars in Saskatoon. I was just looking at the bridge, and I played the game over breakfast, just watching all the cars go by and just counting like white car after white car. It's like, why white cars? Like, why white cars? Is that a signal for something? What does it represent today? And I always think the game of opposites. Whatever's popular today will probably shift and turn into something different tomorrow, which means in 5 years from now, should you be designing a white car? Should you be maybe thinking of a different color because people have exhausted all the white car options out there? That's a kind of a dumb example, but it's just your everyday. You're seeing it all the time. If you have kids, what are your kids playing with? What are the toys? What does that mean for them in the future? When I was a kid, I used to play with Legos. It was just all about imagination. If I wanted to build a dinosaur, I had to construct this geometric blob, and I would see a dinosaur. Nowadays, you just buy the dinosaur head and you snap it on the end. So what does that mean for the future of a world where I feel we're in a crisis of imagination, and maybe we should remove the details from the toys and let the kids use their imagination more so that it helps us down the road as they strengthen their imagination. So it'd be an example of how I see that signal, interpret that signal, and then apply it in a way that is meaningful to me or meaningful to your organization, your company, your bottom line, your P&L, whatever it is that you're doing. There's a different way to interpret these signals.
So as kind of the future that you presented, I think is very optimistic, and I like that because I'm an optimist myself. But I guess like profit and capital drives businesses forward, right? So how do we, as creatives, kind of, or pioneers in this industry, how do we ensure that things don't devolve into like this nefarious use of AI? Because 20 years ago during the dot-com bubble, like Google was like, oh, our mission statement is don't be evil, and we see how that went, or how where that's going. So it's like, what can we do to ensure that we don't get into this like weird free-for-all race to the bottom, I guess? Yeah,
it's a complicated thing to think about. But my morals are. I'm confident in my moral standing, in what I believe in. I also believe that there are more good actors in the world than there are bad actors in the world. And having that trust is important. And yes, Google had an optimistic don't be evil thing that happened once upon a time. I don't think Google is evil. Google is doing some things that are questionable, but overall, none of these companies are purely evil. The idea is to rein it back and really consider like how you are, like take care of your own yard. And if everybody's just kind of taking care of their own space collectively, it'll be a better outcome in general. And ultimately, I'm not against capitalism. Like I like stuff. I like flying places and driving cars and having TVs. Capitalism isn't the bad thing. It's the exploitation that comes around it that's really, really bad. There's ways that we can imagine, like what's a different version of capitalism? What is it, the quote, it's harder to imagine the end of capitalism than it is to imagine the end of the world. And that's true, and that's a great idea to ponder. So what does it look like in a world where we've, I don't know, maybe fixed our broken food system and created something that's better, more sustainable, healthier, and this is the beauty about thinking about these optimistic versions of multiple futures that are out there. There is no one future, right? Everything is to be determined. So I think as long as we are not buying into the doom and gloom that we see on the media, also realizing the media is very biased in terms of like what sells their headlines. We've never lived in it's never been better. The world has never been a better place, objectively speaking, when you look at like the state of how people are living. The lens that we're seeing it through makes it look like it's a terrible, terrible place. I think we need to break ourselves out of that and start thinking more hopefully and optimistically, and being responsible for ourselves and for our surroundings to forge a better future and imagine those preferred futures that we would like to see individually. Thank you.